Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by the members of oldsschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with manicexpression.com, the website where you can truly express yourself. To Old School Lane Casual Chats, episode number 11. And as usual, I'm Patricia.
And I'm Kevin.
And today we're going to be talking about a nostalgic TV show. One that came out over 20 years ago on ABC, and it featured dinosaurs. We're not talking about anything that involves with Jurassic Park, or anything that involves with The Land Before Time, or anything that involves with anything, dinosaur related or something like that, I don't know. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Dinosaurs. So yeah, Dinosaurs was basically a family sitcom starring dinosaurs that were basically puppets. It featured a bunch of characters and it had a lot of jokes. It was really great for both kids and adults. Now, originally we were going to be talking about Wienerville, but then Kevin came along and he said, "Hey, Patty, why don't we talk about Dinosaurs?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, really? Dinosaurs? I haven't seen that show in almost 20 years." So I took the time. It took me about 2 weeks for me to catch up and see all 4 seasons. And right now we're about to talk about it. So, Kevin, when did you first see Dinosaurs?
Wow, well, I first saw Dinosaurs back when it first aired on ABC, which was 1991. It was actually part of the TGIF Friday lineup. One of the things that Jim Henson wanted to prove out to people was that his puppets were not just for kids, they were also for adults. And TGIF was primarily a very family-oriented block, although it had adult situations and whatnot and what have you. There was Full House. There was Family Matters, there was Step by Step, which I also love. I think that's a very underrated show, but that's for another time. And there was Dinosaurs. Boy Meets World would come in a little bit later, back in the 90s. But Dinosaurs stood out because, unlike the other previous shows, and you also had Perfect Strangers, by the way, which I also love, Dinosaurs was a live-action show with puppets. But it wasn't puppets like the Muppets or Sesame Street. These were puppets that were animatronic that you would see like maybe in theme parks. Most of them. There was also a lot of hand puppets as well. But what was really great about this show was that while it was viewed for kids, it had adult themes. And I always loved this show. And of course, we always remember Baby Sinclair when he would hit Earl with the frying pan and not the mama, which was coined by him, and it became a household phrase. Merchandising, there was board games, there was dolls. There was a doll of Baby Sinclair. There was 2. There was a puppet and there was a talking doll. Action figures, coloring books, comic books, you name it, the works. I don't know if there was a video game though.
I don't recall on a video game.
Yeah, but it was a very popular show. But it was very underrated because a lot of people felt that it was a ripoff of The Simpsons because you had a family of dinosaurs. And it was a family, and you had an idiot savant father. You had a character that was like Bart. He wasn't like Bart, but you had a character that stood out from the rest like Bart. But it was a great show nonetheless, and I just saw every episode on Netflix, and I said, well, we have to talk about this because I thought it was great. And I was really touched by the last episode, which we'll get to.
Oh, we'll definitely get to, that's for sure.
But, yeah, that's when I first encountered Dinosaurs, and I was a huge fan. I still am a huge fan. I think it's a brilliant written show. I appreciate it even more when I got older. Happy Meals, there was McDonald's Happy Meal toys based off the show. It's just a great show in general,
Yeah, I think so too. The first time I saw it, it was the same as you, Kev. I saw it when it first came out in 1991 in ABC. We were both very young, and it was during the time of TGIF. And I remember seeing it, and my mom, she let me see it because she thought it was just a bunch of, dinosaurs like you see on Sesame Street and something like that. And, just like with many shows that we grew up with in the 90s, the moment that you get older, you start seeing shows in a different way. Same thing when you see shows like Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life and Animaniacs. It just had that double entendre. There are some things about it that are funny when you were young, and then there's a completely different thing that you see when you get older. And you are right, Kevin. I do feel that the show is very underrated because it came out 2 years after The Simpsons. And this was during a time in which animated sitcoms for adults were in. You had shows such as The Critic and Life with Louie and Duckman.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It was a lot of shows at the time were trying to cash in on the success of The Simpsons. Now, The Simpsons came out in 1989. But they didn't fully bloom until the early 90s. And in the early 90s, you had Ren and Stimpy. This is the shows that opened that the Simpsons opened the floodgate for. You had Beavis and Butthead. You had Ren and Stimpy. You had Rugrats. I want to say Doug because it was part of that group of Nickelodeon shows. But, that was geared more for kids. But but you had Rugrats, you had The Critic, you had Duckman,
Life with Louie.
Well, Life with Louie was a Saturday morning cartoon show. It wasn't a primetime show.
No, it wasn't a primetime show, but it was basically like a sitcom kind of show, like The Simpsons.
Well, no, it was. They had specials, but then it became a Saturday morning. But I wouldn't say it was a prime. I mean, you would consider the same thing about Edith Ann. The Lily Tomlin special that was actually a pilot, but I'm talking about primetime shows.
Oh, okay, primetime shows. Okay.
Like the Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy originally, they aired I remember they aired it on during the evenings. They didn't really air on Saturday mornings until they got popular.
Exactly.
But you had these shows, Rocko's Modern Life also, and Our Real Monsters, and it wasn't that they followed the Simpsons path, but because there were different shows, obviously, but it was that it wanted to show that these shows were not just for kids; they were also for adults.
It's interesting that you mentioned The Simpsons, and then you mentioned Ren and Stimpy and Rugrats, because as some of you old school hardcore Nickelodeon fans know, the first 3 seasons of The Simpsons were animated by Klasky Csupo, and then as time went on, they went off to do Rugrats. And then as for the Ren and Stimpy show, it was basically the show that kind of broke the mold when it came to animation. You can read all about this in the recent book that came out called Sick Little Monkeys, The Unauthorized Ren and Stimpy Story by Thad Komorowski. I would highly recommend that you pick that up. It's a really amazing book. But anyway, so basically, in a way, you could say that those shows that came out in the late 80s and early 90s, they were the ones that changed everything. And then when you have something like Dinosaurs, it wasn't often that you would see a full primetime program that was basically involving puppets, especially since it was 1 year after Jim Henson died.
Yeah. Well, in the first episode, they actually do a memorable thing for Jim Henson,
Yeah, and this was the show that he really wanted to do, but unfortunately he passed away right before he could see it. And then
he passed away in 1990, and the show came out in 1991.
Exactly. But, luckily Brian Henson, who was Jim Henson's son, would later on become the executive producer of the show.
Well, actually, it's funny you said that. Brian Henson, he actually not only was the executive producer, he also had directed a few episodes and also provided the voice of several of the puppets. There was... I forgot who. He was in the first episode. A creature that Earl was about to eat. Rizit. His name was Rizit.
I remember that one. That was the episode in which Earl went over to
the Microsaurus, the very first episode. It was actually ironic because he was about to eat him, and then later on he becomes Earl's boss, like second boss. So.
Yeah, I remember that one. He becomes like the assistant to the boss.
Yeah. But moving right along, one of the things we wanted to talk about Dinosaurs was that even though it was geared, it had a kid demographic. Now we can't say for a fact that it was for kids because there were a lot of different issues that they brought. It was for the adults, it was Earl standing up to his boss. There was Monica, who was friend. There was with sexual harassment when she went to court because of being sexually harassed. Robbie taking steroids and all that, and Charlene Hale. Obviously these were like teenage, young adult issues, and but there was a lot of episodes. Some episodes, I have to say, were very, very dark. It was the endangered species episode, which I'm going to be honest. I still cannot watch that episode. I remember I first watched that episode at my ex-girlfriend's house. She had both seasons of Dinosaurs, and we watched them in order. And I drove her nuts because whenever I was there, I always told her to put it on, and she got very mad because that's all we did was watch Dinosaurs, but I didn't have the DVDs. And we watched Endangered Species, and I was so upset by that episode because it left you so sad. It was about these two endangered species that Earl was about to eat, these two creatures, which were actually pretty cute because they had chubby cheeks, but they, and, he's about to give them for Fran for their 50th or wedding anniversary, and then...
I think it was the 20th.
Yeah, it was some kind of anniversary or whatever.
Yeah, it was the 20th anniversary.
Robbie talks to them because they're living things, and they say, we're the endangered, we're the last of our kind, and all that. So Robbie was like, well, you guys should mate, so that you could populate. And they were like, okay, because since they're the last, they mate. And then Robbie tries to talk to Earl, his father, about it, and Earl, being pig-headed, doesn't listen. And then the creatures talk to Earl. And then at work, he talks to his boss, B.P. Richfield, who was this, very sadistic, in a funny way, evil boss. But, pretty much he was a jerk.
Yeah.
The last episode. And he basically eats the two endangered species because he kind of connives Earl and saying, I can take care of them, I'll open a sanctuary for them, they're young. And at the end of the episode, we find out that he eats them, and Earl is very distraught, he's upset, he's crying, and then we find out that they end up mating and they have babies. So, and then of course, there was also another sad episode. It's not as sad as Endangered Species, it's actually more lighthearted. It's the one called Driving Miss Ethel, where Ethel, the grandmother of the Sinclair household, Fran's mother, is dying to go to her high school reunion, and she's old, she's so age, and when she goes there, she finds out that they all died, and she's very upset, and that was all the people she got, because aside from her daughter and Robbie and Charlene also, even though Charlene was materialistic, that's all she ever had. She doesn't have anybody else. She has no family, no nothing. Her husband Lou had passed away, and she has a very bad relationship with Earl. But then Earl says, I feel bad for Ethel. I can play the part of the son-in-law. And then of course there's the Changing Nature, which we'll get to, which was I think the most depressing episode. I think it outbeat David the Gnome actually because it was so sad.
I think you might be right. I think it is way more depressing than the ending episode to David the Gnome, but we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, definitely Dinosaurs, when you look at it, there are some things that are so fantastic about it, like you just mentioned before, the characters. You start getting to know the characters more, and yeah, Earl Sinclair is like your typical everyman. He's a bumbling moron, he's very simplistic, he's into his ways, kind of like Archie Bunker and Homer Simpson, and...
Well, it's funny about that because the difference between Archie and Earl was that Archie was a racist. Earl really wasn't really a racist. Earl was just very old-fashioned, like Archie Bunker. Archie Bunker would use a lot of racial slurs, and but ironically, it's so funny you said that because Sally Southers, who was on All in the Family as Gloria Stivic, provided the voice of Charlene Sinclair, and I forgot his name, who did the voice of B.P. Richfield.
Sherman, I think it was Sherman Hemsley, the guy who was George Jefferson.
Yeah, and he was on All in the Family.
Yes.
And also I want to point out, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of TV sitcom celebrities did voices on this show. You had Jason Alexander from Seinfeld was on that show.
Yep.
Michael Richardson, as George Costanza, as everybody knows. Kramer, Michael Richardson did a voice. Saturday Night Live, Michael McKean did did most of the background characters on the show, which was really cool. He, fellow Saturday Night Live alumni, Conehead star, all those Christopher Guest movies. He did some voices, which was I thought was really cool. There was other voice actors Tim Curry. Well, Tim Curry, is amazing in everything he does. Legend, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Muppet Treasure Island, Congo. Did a lot of voices for that show. In fact, towards the end of the season, he actually did most of the characters. Christopher Malloy from Law and Order was Spike. Okay.
Then there was also Buddy Hackett, who was the grandfather.
Buddy Hackett, and you also had
Tony Shalhoub, who was in there as he did a guest appearance. You may know him as the detective from Monk.
And who could forget also from Up? What was his name?
Ed Asner.
Yeah, he played the Georgie in Georgie Must Die. So the show really had a lot of. How a lot of TV shows have guest stars. You had all these great TV celebrity stars. It was just. It was just great,
Yeah, and a lot of the people who created the show and a lot of the writers would go on to write a lot of sitcoms such as Roseanne and Boy Meets World and a lot of shows. And, their impact and the way that they wrote the shows are still up there. In fact, Michael Jacobs, one of the creators of Dinosaurs, he's going to be writing episodes for The Girl Meets World.
Yeah. When is that coming out, Angela?
They say that it might be coming out this fall, but there hasn't been a lot of information of it as of yet. But yeah, there was not to mention a lot of the puppeteers that were there, like Steve Whitmire and Kevin Clash, and just a lot of people who worked for Jim Henson, helped a lot for this show.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, one of the major things that made the show so great were the themes that were introduced. I think one of my favorite ones is A New Leaf. A New Leaf, in which the episode in which Robbie's just really angry with Earl because Robbie's just different from him. And then he and Spike go over to the woods, and then they find, these leaves. And then when they start eating it, they start feeling good. And then, it's kind of like... Huh?
I'm laughing because there's the scene, I don't know if anyone remembers, I don't know if you remember it too, but there's the scene with B.P. Richfield, and he eats the leaf, and he actually does the Jimi Hendrix, and he has the glasses. Now, if you remember the episodes, whenever B.P. Richfield would be in shock, whenever something would surprise him, the horns on his head, he would have that, he would hit the ceiling. It was sort of like a running gag because he was so big. And when he ate the leaf, he actually purposely thought he was Jimi Hendrix. He was banging his head, and the ceiling kept, coming down. But it was, so I thought that was pretty hysterical.
But the one thing that was really hysterical about it was the ending. They purposely knew that it was going to be a drug PSA episode because there was just many of them. Yeah. There were just so many drug PSA episodes in many sitcoms and cartoons at the time. And they blatantly said, yeah, please don't do drugs so that you won't see any more of these shoved down your throat, cheesy, preachy PSA episodes.
Oh, wait, do you remember that thing I was talking to you about? The one from, with B.P. Richfield when he was banging his head on the ceiling purposely?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that one. And then he was, all dressed up as, some sort of crazy hippie, and then his supervisor calls him and says that he's fired, and then he's like, everything's cool now, because, now I'm so happy, I'm relaxed, we get to do nothing, and we get to make lots of money.
What did you think of Roy? I know this is really random, but Roy, Earl's friend, Pally Boy, what did you think of him?
Well, to tell you the truth, he's not really one of my favorite characters, because he's basically just your stereotypical sidekick of the main character. He's like Barney Rubble. But he was funny, though. Like this one episode, he was really funny, and when Charlene gets the job and we say so, he said something to B.P. Richfield, and B.P. Richfield goes, "Hess, I'm gonna cut you and turn you into a suitcase." And then Hess goes, "Oh, well, I always wanted to travel with you." I found that funny because they're both dinosaurs, and dinosaurs got that leather skin. And the other one was in the woods or something, where Baby Sinclair had to know what it's like to be on his own.
and Roy, Earl, and Robbie are sinking in the quick, which I'm going to watch tonight because I love that episode. It's one of my favorite episodes. They're sinking in the tar, and that whole episode is just brilliantly written because it's like nothing goes right for those three guys. And Baby Sinclair comes with this guy. I guess he's like in tune with the forest, who actually is supposed to be Roy's missing father because Roy's father was missing. But anyway, he's talking, and Roy goes, and all you see is Roy's face because they're slowly sinking. You see Robbie and Earl's head sticking out, and you see Roy's face, just his mouth moving. His whole body is covered in tar, and he's like, would you mind if we could talk about this later? It's like I'm dying. I'm getting suffocated in tar right now. I don't know. I just found him to be really funny. I mean, I know he's supposed to be like the Ed Norton of like the prehistoric age, but
yeah, Ed Norton, Barney Rubble. He's like the sidekick.
Yeah, but I always love. I don't know. Just Roy was just.
Yeah, he was a funny guy, but he wasn't one of my favorite characters.
No, well, who was your favorite character? My favorite character was Earl, by the way, and Baby Sinclair.
I have to say the same thing. Tied also with Robbie.
Oh yeah, I love Robbie. What is your favorite Robbie theme episode?
The one, obviously, A New Leaf is one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites with Robbie involves with him trying to be tough, so he joins up with Spike's gang.
Oh yeah, he eats those things, the spikes.
Yeah, that's the one.
And then I love my favorite part. Well, it's not my favorite part, but it's when he lifts the refrigerator. And actually, I have two favorite parts. I'm going to tell everybody right now. He lifts the refrigerator, and he calls Earl fat boy, or he says something to Earl, and Earl just like feels so stupid. And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it, little guy." And like Robbie just listens like nothing. And then Robbie has the hangover from the spikes, and Spike is there, and he's like, well, you're gonna have to eventually apologize to your family because you act like a jerk. You pushed Charlene out of the bathroom. You made Earl look like an idiot. You yelled at your mother, and you crushed Baby Sinclair's rattle. You're obviously you're gonna have to apologize. So Robbie's like trying to detoxicate himself. He's like, all right, just bring them one at a time in small groups. And I laughed so hard. And then Spike goes, well, there's a small group right there, and you see Earl come waltzing in, and Earl's like petrified of Robbie. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry, son. I'll leave you alone. I'll let you, But you want to know something? Well, I'll tell you my favorite Robbie episode, and then I just want to point something out. I think my favorite Robbie episode would have to be that one, Steroids to Heaven.
Oh,
and also,
yes.
And also the male dominance episode where he challenged Earl to like a battle, and Earl loses, and he has to become the father of the household, and he realizes that it's so tough, and he's just like, oh man, like he just can't do it, like, oh man.
Yeah, in every sitcom you always have that one episode in which the kid feels like he can be the parent.
Oh, and this one clearly proved it. But did you realize that what I was going to say is that how all the dinosaurs had such beautiful vocabulary, like the way they talked, especially Earl. Like the way they spoke with such intelligence.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really nicely balanced because there's some characters in which they have a nice depth to them that you would never expect to, from a show that is about talking dinosaurs. And each one of them always had something that made them stand out. And it is, especially I think Baby Sinclair is a perfect example about this, because he's a baby, but you would never expect the baby to be just as smart, even smarter than the father. He was the Stewie Griffin of his time.
Minus the fact that he wanted to kill his mother, though.
Well, yeah, definitely. Instead, he wanted to kill his father.
My favorite episode I have so many favorite episodes of Baby Sinclair. I mean, he made that show. But one episode I thought was funny was when, I don't know what it was, but Earl and Fran didn't want to say a word. And they were like, Fran was like, I don't want the B-A-B-Y to know what we're talking about. And Earl was like, I don't care what the Earl being Earl. And then the baby has these building blocks, and they all have numbers, and it spells that they think I can't spell, and he pushes it forward to the audience, and he laughs hysterically. I mean, that was just great right there, But But Earl, I just found it so ironic how he spoke so intelligently and he was such an idiot. Like, he was just...
Yeah, because
you
when
know?
you have TV dads that are supposed to be idiots, like Homer Simpson and like Peter Griffin or something like that, they're always depicted as morons. But with Earl, he always... He was, like we said, he was like Archie Bunker. He was like Homer Simpson. He was like Ralph Cramden. He just had that... He was basically just portraying as the typical TV dad that you would see at the time. You know, not like smart like Dr. Huxtable from The Cosby Show smart.
Yeah.
But just intelligent enough for him to stand out against Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin as like the more intelligent dad.
Well, he spoke like Cliff Huxtable, but he just didn't have the intelligence like Cliff Huxtable.
Yeah, he didn't have that intelligence. I mean, he always stood for his ways, just like Archie did. And, you know, the things that he grew up with, tradition, regardless if they don't even know where it originated from, or, you know, that's just the way it's always been. He, you know, even though he doesn't know where it came from, he doesn't question it, he just follows it. He's like that, you know, really typical person who always followed by the rules. And then you have somebody like Robbie, in which they're, you know, he's trying to find out why tradition is the way it is, and sometimes tradition is sometimes pointless, and you have to broaden out into the next generation. You have to broaden out with new ideas and things that you wouldn't even fathom of. Like the one episode in which we first get introduced to Ethel, in which, you know, they were supposed to throw her in a tar pit, because when you reach 72, that's when you die. And that was tradition.
I remember that episode. Remember when VP Richfield had the video thing of his mother when he pushed her off?
I know, that's ridiculous. That's something you see in AFV. That's like a treasured memory in which you just decide to keep it in and hoping you win $10,000.
Remember, guys, there's nothing glorious about pushing your
mother-in-law
off the cliff.
Exactly.
And we announced that day as Hurling Day. Also, moving right along, did you know that it took 3 people to operate the dinosaur puppets?
Yeah, it did, because whenever you see the credits, you always see that there were 3 people that were credited. You have maybe like 2 people that was, you know, one was the voice, and then the other rest of the people were credited as the ones who controlled the puppets. And they were heavy. They were really heavy.
Well, Patty, get the voice list up. I want to talk about the voice list of the main actors, because those were also the core of the people who did Dinosaurs, like Sally Struthers and, you know...
Yeah, the one person that everybody remembers as the voice actor is Kevin Clash as Baby Sinclair. Yeah, this was during a time in which he just started voicing Elmo. So a lot of people were most likely introduced to Kevin Clash as Baby Sinclair as opposed to Elmo. Elmo started getting really big around the mid-90s. Remember those Tickle Me Elmo dolls?
Oh, God, I still have mine in the box.
Yeah, so yeah, Kevin Clash, he had that same voice as Elmo. It was just really, like, light, and it was just really funny. He had the best catchphrases, like, I'm the baby, gotta love me, or, you know, not the mama, or again, or... Yeah, he always had the best lines, I think. Yeah, you know, he was the one that practically made the show. They didn't use him as much as, like, Steve Urkel in the later seasons of Family Matters, but they used him enough. That way the rest of the characters could shine.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Another person who also voiced for Dinosaurs was, obviously, you had Stuart Pankin as Earl Sinclair.
I love Stuart. And he was the best. I just love Stuart.
Yeah, do you remember what other shows he was in right before, you know, he started doing Dinosaurs?
Yeah. I know he was on like a satire news thing on HBO. But
yeah, I remember, not necessarily the news.
Yeah, and he was also on. He did some voices on Batman the Animated Series, and he also was in Honey We Shrunk Ourselves, which was the third Honey I Shrunk the Kids film. Yeah,
and he was also in Animaniacs, and he also did a voice in Duckman and Batman Beyond, and, you know, yeah, he was in a lot of things.
Oh, I wonder who he was in Batman Beyond.
I think it just was, like, one character or something. I don't know. Yeah, so Stuart Pankin was Earl Sinclair. Jessica Walter was Fran Sinclair.
Oh, yeah. The matriarch of the household.
Yes, and most of you will probably know her. She was Lucille Bluth on Arrested Development. She was Tabitha Wilson on 90210. She's Mallory Archer in the FX animated series Archer, and she's Elaine Roberts at Retired at 35.
Didn't you say that was your favorite show, Patty?
Arrested Development is one of my all-time favorite shows.
No, the other show, the first show. This is 35?
Retired at 35, I've never seen it, but Arrested Development is one of my all-time favorite shows.
I thought you could have sworn you said that was your favorite show.
Not really. The next person, well, you already know that Sally Struthers was in, Dinosaurs, and she played as Charlene, and you already know her from shows such as All in the Family. Jason Willinger was the voice of Robbie Sinclair. He never really did too much acting afterwards. He mostly did a lot of voice acting, and he did like small roles in a couple of movies and TV shows. He quit acting in 2007.
Does it say why?
No reason why. And yeah, and then you had let's see, let me just look up the other characters who did the voices. So yeah, like we said, Sherman Hemsley was the voice of Earl's boss. What was the name again?
G.P. Rich.
And let's see, there was also
Monica and Roy.
Yeah, there was Roy. And there was also a recurring character named Monica, who was like a brontosaurus. And also you have the grandmother, who was also played by Kevin Clash, which I have no idea how he did the voice for that.
No, he didn't do the voice of her. There's someone else with the voice.
I'm sorry, that's right. Kevin Clash mostly, he controlled the puppet of her. He didn't do the voice.
Yeah. No.
Seriously, Kevin, what are you doing that is making the police come?
That is you, Patty. They're coming after you because feet stink.
Yeah. Yeah,
so... if you're Patty, if you're near Patty, stay away from the feet.
Yeah. So, yeah, there were a lot of characters, like we mentioned. There was Roy, there was Spike, there was the co-workers. One a lot of people know is Al Sexual Harris, who was played by Jason Alexander. And, then you had the elders, and then you also had the news announcer who was trying to be like Walter Cronkite. He was played by Kevin Clash. Now I remember. So so you had all these characters, and each and every single one of them they shined on. My least favorite character in the house, I don't know. I never really. I really like Charlene, but the thing of it is that she was really typical, very materialistic, and she only mostly cared about shopping and stuff like that. So it would have been nice if maybe they would have differentiated her with all the other teenage girls that were portrayed in TV at the time. But still, she's not that bad in which you can say that she was basically like a stereotype.
How do you feel about her showing her any love? Like, they didn't show her any affection.
Oh, yeah, there were. I think there were a couple of episodes in which she was able to shine, like the one in which she wanted to get her tail because she felt like she wasn't growing up. At least that was nice. Yeah, but there were very rare times in which you really cared for her. I think most of the time it was Robbie who was getting that.
Oh yeah. And Patty was also known for the voice of Troy on the show. Patty was also known as voice actor for Troy on the show.
Yes, I was. And a lot of the lessons that they taught was surprising, back in 1991. They taught things like women's rights, they taught things like drugs, they taught things like sexual harassment, they taught things like peer pressure and drug abuse, masturbation, homosexuality. There was communism, religion. Then there, remember that quote unquote holiday special, Happy Refrigerator Day?
Yep, I remember that one. Yep.
Yeah, it was kind of basically being like, sort of like the Gift of the Magi meets one of those typical Christmas specials, which, I thought that was pretty cool.
What's Gift of the Patty? What's Gift of the Patty again?
I'm sorry?
What was Gift of the Patty again?
The Gift of the Magi, it's basically the story of these two people who loved each other and they were broke. So they sold off all their material possessions so that they can give a gift to one another. Basically, in the episode, they sold their gifts back. They went to the store and they brought their gifts back hoping to get money back. And the store had never heard of this before. About returning things from a store that you just recently purchased your items and then wanting to get money back. So what they did was that they got less of the money that they received and they were able to get like a really small cooler as a refrigerator. Then you had the whole pageant thing in which they were acting out, which kind of makes it look like it was a Thanksgiving's Day special in which they were all dressed up like pilgrims and looking for the land and hopefully, getting, basically changing life as it is. Instead of the Pilgrims landing in Plymouth Rock and then, building up the, eventually, the Native Americans would come along and show them how to survive and then have the feast. You have the dinosaurs who came along. They were struggling for food. They were walking to and fro so they can survive. And then all of a sudden, a person decided to create a refrigerator. And then they decided to live off of that, and they no longer traveled. They just stayed in one place, settled down, had a family, and then relied on the refrigerator so they could keep their food cold. Which is kind of interesting.
Did you always want to keep your food cold?
Oh, yes. As far as everybody knows, we all have refrigerators. It's interesting that we just demote ourselves from a refrigerator to a storage unit that is just filled with ice back in the 1700s, to an ice box, and then back to a refrigerator again at around the 1910s. So I just find that to be hilarious that in 6,000,003 BC, we already had refrigerators. And speaking of which, they also had a couple of humans in the show, but they were portrayed as cavemen, and cavemen were, as dumb as animals. Remember that episode in which Robbie decided to find a cave woman and keep her as a pet?
Yeah, that was your favorite episode, wasn't it?
Not really, but, I thought it was interesting because it was one of the very few times in which you actually see humans.
Well, why do you think it's interesting? I want to hear your take on it.
Well, it's just interesting of how, humans are perceived in the show, and then you have something like, Earl is always saying, like, the whole world will be in ruins if cavemen were to take over because they're nothing but wild animals. And it's true. I mean, they're kind of dumb. They're savage. They're not smart. They don't even talk. And later on, in which, well, the last episode, which we'll get to in a minute. Don't you worry. Be patient, people. And that's when life starts all over again, and then we become the dominant species. So.
Yeah, but Patty, you say that you always wanted to be the dominant species. I don't understand you. You told me specifically that you'd rather be a dinosaur than a caveman.
Not really, because if I was a what kind of dinosaur would I be if I was a dinosaur?
You really want me to answer that?
Please.
You would be a pterodactyl.
Oh, a pterodactyl. That is so typical of you.
Now, Patty, how much money can I expect for you to talk like that during the whole podcast?
Forget it, man. I just recovered from a sore throat.
Well, everybody, Patty is now officially turned herself into a pterodactyl.
Yes, I'm a pterodactyl now, thanks to Kevin.
Oh, come on, Patty. It's not so bad. I mean, we'll feed you pellets and everything.
Whatever. All right, well, let's see what else was there to talk about.
No, I want you to talk like that. Come on, please.
No, if I talk like that, then people will be turning off the episode.
Oh, come on. From now on, Patty has to talk like that.
Forget
Whoever wants Patty to talk like a pterodactyl, put that in the comment box.
Yeah, please, post it in the comments if you want me to start talking like a pterodactyl.
From now on, Patty will now officially be known as Pterodactyl Patty.
Okay.
I want Patty from now on to talk like a pterodactyl.
I think we talked about it long enough for people to finally know about, as you know, the infamous final episode of Dinosaurs. Kevin, would you like to talk about it?
No, it's too sad. You talk about it.
All right, I'll talk about it. So yeah, this is spoilers for those who do not want to hear about this. If you do not want to know about the final episode of Dinosaurs, turn off the podcast, go on Netflix, and watch Dinosaurs. And then when you're done, come back to us, and then we can discuss about it. The infamous episode of Dinosaurs that we will know as Changing Nature. So yeah, it all started, the episode starts, and every May 14th, there's supposed to be a bunch of beetles that are supposed to return to Pangea that they can be able to eat. There's only one beetle left that is named Stan. So Richfield tells Earl to help out, help them out in order for the beetle to survive. But what happens is one big catastrophe after another. With each situation, the following happens. You have the rainforest that basically starts dying. And now the beetle can't be able to make itself a home. So then there was this suggestion that if you go over to the volcano and, you make it explode, then the clouds would start coming out and you would make rain. However, what happens is that the ashes and the smoke start blocking the entire sky. And it gets so cold that it blocks the entire sun, and eventually there'll be an ice age. And
Sorry.
And so the second ice age is about to happen, and Earl realizes what he had done. He had realized that he had doomed not only his family, but the entire dinosaur world. In the end of Dinosaurs, the series finale, all of the dinosaurs die, and you basically see all the family gather up together for one final time, and you see the news announcer announcing that the second ice age will be coming, and then he announces his name and says, "Good luck and goodbye." And the entire show ends right there. And you just wonder to yourself, oh my God, this is the saddest thing I had ever seen in my life. Nowadays, when you look it up, it still retains that sadness. I would even go off into saying that it is even sadder than the series finale of David the Gnome. And you already know in my top 10 saddest Nickelodeon moments and how much that is sad. Well, in the last episode of David the Gnome, it was only David and Lisa who died. In Dinosaurs, everybody dies. And you're just wondering, all the characters that we had gone to know for years is dead. That is unbelievable. And the creators, when they created this episode, said, we don't want there to ever be another episode of Dinosaurs. We wanted to make it foolproof that there would never be another episode. And this was the result.
And Patty cursed him out. She wrote him a very angry letter and was like, you, why did you do this? You ruined my childhood. Now when I think of dinosaurs, I'm going to think of death. Oh.
I don't know about that, but it's almost like the equivalent if you were to see the original ending of Little Shop of Horrors.
What about?
The original ending was supposed to be in which Sydney takes over the entire Earth, and he starts eating everybody.
They call him Sydney?
Yeah.
His name was Audrey, too.
Oh yeah, Audrey, that's right, Audrey. In which Audrey eats, basically Audrey eats everybody and takes over the entire world.
Does he even eat you?
No, I'm still alive. I'm still good. But yeah, long story short, the last episode is beyond depressing. It has been shown multiple times in many top 10 saddest moments in childhood lists. Next to the death of Optimus Prime and, the death of, also, the death, Chucky's mom, the episode of Mother's Day in which you talk about the death of Chucky's mom and, a whole bunch of other childhood sad moments that, will most likely make you cry when hearing this.
Hey, I didn't know Optimus Prime died, by the way.
It was in the Transformers movie, dude.
What movie?
The Transformers movie.
Yeah, I didn't see the Transformers movie.
Oh. Oops. Anyway, I'm sorry. I thought you knew. Sorry. Anyway, well, while closing down this episode of Casual Chats, do you think the show still holds up to this day, Kev?
Of course. Definitely does. What about you, Patty?
Yes, I think it does. When you rarely see a lot of shows based on puppets, And nowadays, you see, like, the Muppets are coming back. It would be so nice if we can be able to have another show based on puppets that is for adults to come back on primetime television. I think that the audience would really appreciate it.
I think so, too.
But whatever you do, don't do a remake of Dinosaurs. Just don't.
I was actually going to ask you that.
Don't. I know I've done a lot of lists of I want to see certain shows that want to be remade. I know that. I that's true. There are some certain shows that need to be remade, but only because, there's no other format like it on television, or the show has some serious problems, and a reboot of it will fix the flaws and bring out some new things to the new generation. But yeah, I think maybe I would suggest of making a new TV series based on, puppets that is for adults, as opposed to just making a remake.
Oh, Patty. Why would you want to remake Dinosaurs?
I just said I didn't want to. I said make an entirely brand new show. Make an entirely brand new show with the same concept, puppets, that is both for kids and adults, and bring it out on the air. It can work. I would love to see something like that.
Well, let me ask you a question, Patty. Why don't you do a show about dinosaurs?
Yeah, I guess so. But then again, we're kind of busy with Little Monsters, so maybe we're done with that.
Why don't you do a show called Patty Monsters? That'll be animatronic and live action. I think it could work.
I think they should have a new show, but not a remake of Dinosaurs.
Yeah. They probably will do it, because they always do remakes.
Yeah, I know. They've been doing a lot of remakes based on shows that we love, and eventually, most likely, they will get to Dinosaurs. If the Muppets movie 2 becomes, hugely popular, just like the first one, then you know that they're going to most likely try to revive not only the Muppets...
Not necessarily. I mean, chances are what they'll most likely do is they'll try to reboot it, but I don't know. I don't think this show should be rebooted, because it doesn't seem like that type of show,
Yeah, I know. It doesn't seem like that kind of show. It's not the kind of show that's outdated. It took place in 60 million years ago, so...
The 90s version of 60 million BC, that's really what it was.
Yeah, 60 million BC. So yeah, it took place in 60 million BC, so it was already based on the past. The animatronic puppetry still works really well. You can still see the movement quite nicely. The lip movement is nice, as opposed to those horrid, Ninja Turtle straight-to-video movies. And, the writing is still sharp, it's still funny, it's still witty. I think that a remake of it would be really pointless and unnecessary.
Yeah. It's not hard, especially my
Right. So yeah, that concludes episode 11 of Casual Chats. What should be for the next episode?
Actually, next episode is going to be a surprise.
Ooh, a surprise. Well, we'll let you know what it is when it comes. So until then, I'm Patricia.
And I'm Kevin. By the way, take care, wash your hair, and I'll see you later.
Yep, see you later.
Take care and wash your hair. Is that what he said?
Yeah, take care and wash your hair.